Story 1. I have been single for 6 years after my divorce. I have chosen to remain single because I no longer have the ability to tolerate accommodating someone else's nonsense. My own challenges are enough to deal with. Story 2. I might be that way. I just like solitude and my own company. I do not think there is much lacking in my life that a girlfriend or wife could offer me, and I do not believe I have much special to offer a girlfriend or wife beyond the standard. I am happy for other couples, but I do not feel empty without a partner. I honestly cannot see myself being married. Story 3. I am one of them. Relationships sound like too much of a hassle, and I do not need one to be happy, so why bother? Story 4. Because they genuinely prefer it that way. It is that simple. We are all different. I do not like cheesecake. Most people seem to. There is no reason. Story 5. My best man is chronically single. He has a college degree, a six-figure job, owns a home, is quite handsome, funny, and witty. He travels often and says he remains single because if someone does not bring something new to his life, what is the point? Story 6. Many people become parents to their spouse, which is not what they expected. Division of labor, bills, assets, and other responsibilities become unequal, leading to resentment. Independent living, if affordable, is simply easier. Story 7. My mom got married at 25 because that was the thing you did. After she and my dad divorced, she went on a couple of dates but then decided to be single. She enjoyed her solitude. After living with my grandmother for the first part of her life, then with roommates as a young adult, and then with my dad for 17 years, she was happy to have time and space for herself. Story 8. Because people are exhausting. After my last relationship, I doubt I am going to look for another. Even my best friends, whom I love, start to drive me insane if I spend too much time with them in a row. Low social battery and whatnot. Story 9. I had an old family friend back in the day. He was pretty much our adopted uncle. He never married. I asked him one day why, and he told me he was never really interested. He had girlfriends during his younger years, but they were more friends than anything. In his early years, he was into raising dogs for racing. He then got into dog shows and was simply more interested in his hobbies. We were essentially his extended family, and he visited us often. He also had a lot of friends within his circle and never needed a romantic relationship. He was in love with his dogs. I respected that greatly. He lived until he was 90 and passed away 20 years ago. He was a very happy man. Story 10. One word. Standards. I won't settle. I consider being single as being in a relationship with myself. I know how well I treat myself, so someone else has to match that or better. Story 11. As a woman nearing 40 who has never been in a serious relationship, I have not met anyone who adds to my life in a meaningful way. I am doing great on my own. I own my home, I travel when I want to, and I do not mind going out to dinner, a movie, or a concert alone, so I do not miss out. I enjoy solitude, but I also see my friends when I need to be social. It is nice being the friend who can just jump in with, "Hey, want to come over after the kids are down?" Adding a second person just for the sake of it seems like a waste. I am not against meeting someone, but I am no longer actively seeking it. Story 12. I have no one to fight for the remote, so there are never sports on my television. I want to stop at a friend's after work. No call needs to be made to explain my whereabouts for the next hour. My money is mine. My meals are all my favorites. I could go on, but you get it. Single forever. Story 13. If I were getting some regularly, I would not be upset at all if I went the rest of my life without a partner. I prefer to have one, but there have absolutely been times for extended periods when I preferred to be alone. I can understand someone having that preference. Story 14. My childhood ruined that possibility for me. No regrets. When I was young, I used to say it was because I had never met my intellectual equal. However, my mother's and father's numerous marriages cured me of wanting a partner. Story 15. Some people just value autonomy more than partnership, and that is not a flaw. They build deep friendships, meaningful work, and solo joy. Intimacy does not always have to look like romance. Story 16. The sheer joy of going to IKEA and picking out whatever furniture you want without asking for anyone else's opinion. Story 17. Looking back on my life, I now know I should never have been in a committed relationship in the first place because I am not good at it. Damn neurotransmitters. I am great in the honeymoon phase, but once all the chemicals wear off, I fail at building something to last. Rinse and repeat. Story 18. I would say it is a better life, especially for women, as long as you have a good circle of friends, family, or pets and can afford to live on your own. I really enjoy being single myself. The independence and the ability to do what you want when you want is priceless. Also, many of my couple friends seem to be bored just getting along or involved in some unappealing power dynamic. I cannot imagine choosing that. Story 19. Have you looked at divorce statistics? What percentage of the remaining marriages are unhappy? Perhaps 25% of the remaining marriages are happy. Would you skydive if 3/4 of parachutes failed? Story 20. I think people don't know how to date. The dating environment today is really difficult for men. One of the dating apps has a 0.2% success rate for men. Asking someone out in public is hard because men do not know how. There is a whole explanation for this, but to keep it simple, people don't date for marriage and the environment is toxic. To fix this, dating app algorithms need to be regulated to allow better outcomes for men. Unwanted sexual advances should be limited so women do not receive creepy messages or random explicit pictures. Story 21. Every time I speak to someone who is in a relationship or married, they literally tell me not to get married. Story 22. I am unwilling to compromise on many things, and there is a whole world out there to keep me entertained. This is not needed. Story 23. I tried and I just do not have the energy to put forth the effort anymore. My heart still longs sometimes, but my gut says no. Honestly, if I had listened to my gut from the beginning, I might have gotten married and had a family by now. I do not know if that would have been better, though. I have always flip-flopped on kids since I was 10. If I changed my mind, my partner would need to be childless, as I do not want children. Story 24. Because humans are complex individuals with varied needs, we are not all cut from the same cloth. The reason doesn't really matter. Maybe they just like it, or maybe it's related to mental health, or maybe they are aromantic. The list goes on. However, as long as they are happy, the reasons aren't anyone's business. It's not so different from people who get married and know they never want children compared to those of us who got married and do want them. We should all be doing what's best for us, not based on random societal pressure, familial pressure, or religious pressure. I'm happy for anyone who stays single and is truly happy that way. Good for you all. May you have a beautiful and fulfilling life. Story 25. As someone who has been married but has been single for the last 15 years, I do not like dealing with other people's nonsense in my own house. I need a place where I can be at peace and do what I want without being nagged or criticized. Story 26. What makes you think people choose it? I mean, some people do choose it. Some people are just better as loners. But for the most part, I think most people who are lifelong single just come to accept it. One of the biggest lies ever told was that there is someone out there for everyone. In reality, that is not the case. Some people try and then accept that it is not in the cards. I think most people who are lifelong bachelors or bachelorettes actively wanted to be in relationships for a good portion of their lives, but after rejection, bad marriages, trauma, trust issues, lies, manipulation, death, and so on, they decide being single is more peaceful and stop trying. I think right now you are seeing more and more people just stop trying. Story 27. Yes, I am one of those people. I am happy to be single and sleep with different partners when I am interested. Then I go back to doing whatever I want, whenever I want. Story 28. Looking back on my life, I now know I should have never been in a committed relationship in the first place because I am not good at it. Neurotransmitters affect me. I am great in the honeymoon phase, but once the chemicals wear off, I fail at building something to last. This pattern repeats. Story 29. A variety of reasons exist. Some people are asexual or aromantic. For some, independence is more rewarding than companionship. Some want a lot of variety and prefer casual dating. Others have had bad experiences and do not want to take the risk anymore. People are different and their reasons differ too. Story 30. Many reasons, my own being. Local people do not seem interested in me and I am not interested in them. I will not move for the sake of meeting someone who might not exist there. I have issues with taking care of myself at times. I do not know if I can handle the needs of a significant other yet. This will come with time, but not now. I enjoy the time I spend on the things I want to do. Gaming, making music, browsing, and so on. I do not want to lose that yet. I am happy with my current setup, thank you. I only have to worry about my own finances. I do not have any fancy places to take a partner unless they like sitting out in a field and swatting flies all day. I have good ties with friends from all over my country, so I never feel lonely. Many people are religious and quite pushy where I live. I am not. I am not sure what to do with another person at this point in my life. I love my family and friends and make sure to spend time with them as much as I can, but even they get tired of my ADHD at some point. Story 31. Relationships require a great deal of effort. I am sure some people do not think it is worth it, myself included at times. Story 32. Was married to a manipulative narcissist. Divorced now. Living my best life and have no intention to change anything. Story 33. I am asexual and aromantic. I have no interest in reproducing, and I have no interest in compromising my own needs or wants to make someone else happy. I hear about other people's relationship drama enough, and I do not have the time or energy to deal with that. I have a great group of friends and coworkers who fulfill my social needs. I am happy being single and do not see myself ever entering a romantic or sexual relationship with anyone. I have nothing to gain, and it is more trouble than it is worth. Story 34. If you come from a family where the father was abusive, you may wonder why people would open themselves up to being trapped in that situation. Story 35. I love being single. I was married for 13 years. I hated picking up after him and putting up with his things. Story 36. People have disappointed them in the past, so they prefer to rely only on themselves because it is safer that way. Story 37. Looking back on my life, I now know I should never have been in a committed relationship in the first place because I am not good at it. I am great in the honeymoon phase, but once all the chemicals wear off, I fail at building something to last. This cycle repeats itself. Story 38. I had relationships and an 8-year marriage when I was younger. I have way too much to accomplish, and I barely have time for myself. I am having fun. It would not be fair to me or another person to get involved. Story 39. Well, sometimes what works for one person might not work for you, so I try as much as possible to respect people's decisions if they choose to stay single. Story 40. Aside from people being asexual or aromantic, people like peace and quiet and doing whatever they want all the time. If you have a robust platonic support system, you will not be particularly lonely. Story 41. My ideal romantic relationship is essentially a closer friendship, and I already have friends. I value my personal space too much for the benefits to be worth it. Story 42. I think the reason is that people are all different and have different needs and desires. I mean, what more can be said other than, because that is what they want. Story 43. Because people are unrealistic and complicated when they are in relationships, most should be single for at least a significant amount of time. This allows them to figure out what works for them instead of molding to a new person and then wanting out. Staying single is much easier than wasting life trying to jump through those hoops. I have an aunt who has probably been single since I was in grade school at least. She had a couple of relationships in between, but ultimately she told us once, when she was drunk, how many times am I supposed to get my feelings hurt before I think, maybe this just isn't for me? She travels, works, and travels some more. I think she is happy, or at least happy enough. Based on what I have seen online, most people are miserable or just struggle with being in a relationship anyway. Story 44. I started my first truly long-term relationship at the age of 38. Honestly, it has been difficult adjusting to considering another person in all aspects of my life. I cannot just travel somewhere spontaneously. Does he want to go? Is he able to go? Would he be upset if he cannot go and I go by myself? Even if he says he is not upset, going by myself when I know he wanted to go is not something I feel comfortable doing. I do not cook certain things that used to be staples for me because he does not like them. I have to make time to go to his house so our time away from home is equitable. I have to make time for his parents and events we attend together. After a lifetime of having my life exactly as I wanted, making space for someone else is a big change. I also find it difficult to truly relax if there is another person in my house who can observe me for some reason. I can see how some people would not want to undertake it if they have been happily single for a long time. Story 45. Because people are different, there is no catch-all reason, just as there is no singular reason people get married. Story 46. Being alone means you can focus on yourself better and not worry about marrying the wrong person. There are also aromantic people who cannot physically feel romantic attraction. While it is true that some of them do not necessarily prefer romantic relationships, most of them are not interested in one. It really depends on what someone wants for themselves, and that is fine. Story 47. I think that will end up being me. I am somewhere on the asexual spectrum, and most men want daily sex. I cannot provide that and will not stress myself out trying to appease them. Story 48. It is hard to coexist with someone who wants to be around you more than you want to be around others. Story 49. My friend says it is easier to spend life with friends and family than with a romantic partner you do not like. Story 50. I do not trust anyone enough to go through the whole process just for them to leave me as a single mother. I do not have it in me. I am not that strong. Story 51. Trust the wrong people and get hurt one too many times, or once you truly feel comfortable with yourself, it is often easier to be alone. People are complicated and complex. Not everyone wants to deal with that. Solitude often provides time for peace, reflection, and the ability to move yourself in the direction you want without noise, pushback, or having to schedule around someone else. Naturally, this does not work for everyone. Some people crave others. They crave attention, the ability to give something to someone else, and someone to talk to, and to each their own. Story 52. Some people want to live life under their own rules, where to live, how to decorate, and so on, without the need to deal with another person's preferences, their mess, or anything else. Story 53. I am one of those people. I was married to one man and later lived with another, and I was very unhappy in both relationships. Life is more peaceful without a romantic relationship. I have friends and family, so I am not lonely, and I also need plenty of alone time. Story 54. I have always been the giver in my relationships. It's exhausting, doing all the household chores and emotional and mental labor while also working full-time, and going to school full-time at one point just burned me out. I love solitude. I love my own company. I find peace being by myself. I can't imagine getting married or dating in the future unless someone comes along who actually adds to that peace instead of subtracting from it. The people in my life who have never been alone worry about me, but the ones who understand, understand. Story 55. We had a substitute teacher in high school who was one of the nicest people to ever live. He was also clearly gay. He grew up in an era and environment where it was considered sinful and shameful, so he remained single his entire life. It makes me sad that he felt he had to deny himself love because of the ignorant beliefs of those around him. Story 56. There are people who are not interested in romantic relationships, sexual relationships, or both. There are people who have trauma connected with relationships. I suspect that something like this was going on with Elizabeth the Virgin Queen. Story 57. It is difficult to find someone whose influence in your life outweighs the peace you have in being alone. The older you get, the more you lean toward peace. If I could find a nice introverted gamer, maybe it would work out. Story 58. I may end up this way. For one, I have trust issues and anxious attachment, so I am a handful myself working on it therapy. But I also like being by myself. I have always been alone for the most part. Even as a kid, I was pretty much ignored. I feel safer when I am alone, and I feel calmer. I feel more like myself. When I am around other people, I work hard to monitor my emotional irregularities, and I am always watching out for people to turn on me. I've managed to keep a few decent friendships going, and I am involved in several community groups, so that is where I get my affection. I receive hugs and kind words. So it is a mix of my comfort being alone and many circumstances that have made me a little people averse. I would like it to change. I've had partners before and it was fun, but they all ended it hurt, so it does not really feel worth it. The positives they bring never outweigh them going away, and I know it is mostly my fault they leave me. Probably people keep telling me it is not all my fault, but I think they are just trying to make me feel better. So it may just be for the best, and I am comfortable with that. I do not feel like I am really missing out on anything. Story 59. They are usually people who have been through a lot and have finally found some inner peace with themselves and in their lives. Adding someone to that can complicate or take away from that peace. Story 60. Because life by yourself is genuinely a lot easier. Spend enough time that way and you will find interacting with other people and their drama to be very tiresome. Story 61. I am happily married, but if I had not met my wife, I imagine I could be equally happy as a single person. There are many ways to live happily, and not all of them involve long-term partnership. In fact, pinning your total happiness on another person is a common problem in relationships. The most successful relationships are unions of two people who find happiness outside of their relationship before coming together. In other words, relationships should mostly be a happiness multiplier, not purely a happiness creator, though they can be that too. Story 62. Honestly, relationships take a lot of work. Studies show that the disconnect between men and women's expectations of relationships is widening. I would not be surprised to see more women choosing to be single because it is preferable to living with men in immature stages of development than to see couples as we used to when it was practically socially mandated. We spent a lot of time telling little girls that they could do anything and then forgot to tell the boys the same. Story 63. The sister of my good friend is a lifelong single person by choice. She is in her 60s now and has had several long-term relationships. Each of them ended because she did not want to be married or live with her partner. I have known her for a long time and asked her why. Basically, she said she just enjoys living life on her own terms and not being beholden to anyone or anything else. She wanted to travel. She traveled. She wanted to custom build a house. She custom built a house. She wanted a new car. She went out and bought a new car. She had a 2-year job opportunity overseas, and she jumped on it. She had no one's needs to consider but her own. Selfish or not, she liked living her life her way with no responsibility to anyone else. She also had no interest in having children, which also makes having a partner less attractive. The single life is not for me, but I understand where she is coming from. Story 64. Assuming they are not just a lone wolf, they are all-or-nothing types. If they cannot have it all, they would rather go without. Story 65. I've had relationships where I feel like I am taking care of my partner. I am putting in 65 to 75%, not 50-50, and there are perpetual mini-crises that require me to solve. Sometimes I just prefer to worry about myself and be able to prioritize what is best for me, rather than always making myself the second priority. Story 66. I lived alone for the latter half of my 20s. I really enjoyed it. Relationships with other people, no matter how similar you are, require work and compromise. The only way to completely live the life you want without compromise is to stay single and self-reliant. It can be lonely, but so can a bad relationship. At least you have freedom when you are single. I personally do not know which lifestyle I prefer, but I can understand why some people would want to forego relationships. Story 67. I am going to stay single for the rest of my life because the love of my life passed away a couple of years ago. No man would ever love me the way he did. I do not feel like dealing with unpleasant or mediocre men again in the dating world. It is hard to find a man who wants to be with me because he genuinely likes or loves me, not because he likes or loves what I do for him. Story 68. Because they love more deeply than others and have been greatly disappointed. They choose to be single and at peace like myself. I do have encounters from time to time, of course, but I never fully engage nor think about marriage. I am happier that way. Story 69. Being single, you are only responsible for yourself. Getting legally married, you become responsible for another person. That means their problems, finances, bills, legal issues, and many other things become yours. They could rack up a lot of debt, and you will be responsible for paying it off. Stay single. Story 70. I have recently had to end several family relationships because I reached the point where I realized there was nothing they could do to restore my trust. Do the right thing? I can no longer believe there is not an ulterior motive. Do the wrong thing? Well, you just proved my point. Even if I really wanted to try again, there is nothing they could do to make it better. I can absolutely see how someone could reach the same point with relationships overall. It is a lot of effort, and after enough bad experiences, even the right answers become wrong. It is better to stay safe and enjoy the platonic relationships where you can feel secure. Story 71. Life can be easier when you only have to worry about yourself. Even the best relationships involve some level of compromise and consideration of the other person's wants and needs. There is a benefit to that, but some people value their own freedom and autonomy more than what that kind of relationship brings. For me, I cannot just quit what I am doing and live in another country on a whim because I have a wife and children to consider. I have a friend who literally did that, and he is enjoying the freedom to make that kind of choice completely on his own. Story 72. My reason was simple. I did not need a relationship and was perfectly content on my own. Then I fell in love with my partner, and we have been together ever since. To be honest, I was quite upset about it at the start. Falling in love really disrupted my plans and affected my mind in a way I found unpleasant. Fortunately, the most severe parts mellowed out in time. Story 73. Betrayal, not because they cheated or anything like that, but sometimes I feel like when you give yourself completely to somebody, they can still cause you pain. Story 74. Because many people can be difficult, I thought I was one of them. Fortunately, something beyond my control happened, and I met my perfect partner. She was so innocent and cute that I felt like a blazing rider. Long story short, people can be challenging, but they can also be amazing. Ride safe and have guns will travel. Story 75. I did not want children. There were 2 times when I discussed marriage with a boyfriend, at ages 23 and 27. They wanted children, so we broke up, and each married the next woman they dated. Once I turned 30, it was no longer a priority. I have had relationships, but I never felt the need to bring up marriage, and neither did they. I was okay with it. I am 60 years old and have no regrets. Story 76. I am going through my second divorce. Are either of them entirely my fault? No, but I contributed to both failures, and it is time to admit to myself that I am either not good at being in a long-term relationship or not good at finding a compatible partner. Either way. Story 77. Being single is trouble-free and ideal for individuals who do not need or want to rely on or support others. Story 78. I am afraid of being hurt by someone I love. It makes me draw a line with someone I liked. Sometimes I think about that. If I were braver, what could have been? Story 79. I think people usually have a strong evolutionary drive to couple up. However, there are billions of humans and not everyone has this drive. I have known some people who were single for life but seemed really unhappy because they had personality issues they were never able to work through. On the other hand, I have known a few people, including one uncle I am very close with and a couple of college friends, who are lifelong singles, and not only do they seem unbothered, they literally thrive. They are super successful and very emotionally healthy. They are the outliers. They are wired to want other things, live that out, and have had happy, successful lives. Story 80. I think many people would be open to the idea of a life partner, but they may have found other things that make their life fulfilling even without a significant other. Meeting a partner could be a nice bonus, but not a necessity to live a meaningful life. Living with a partner can be one way to live a beautiful life. However, it is not the only way. Finding someone you genuinely connect with, who makes you feel valued and seen in the relationship, can be challenging. Dating requires effort. Sometimes it is exhausting to sift through people you do not vibe with romantically in the long term. They can be good people, but maybe just not your person. I understand why some would drop it from their priority list in favor of simply enjoying life as it is. I had a conversation with a friend about how we would feel if we never met the love of our life. As someone who enjoys romantic stories like Bridgerton, I admit I would pause to mourn the loss of a possible future with my own personal spicy viscount. But would I be devastated? No. I cannot imagine making my happiness dependent on one person being present in my life or not. Why should one person hold such weight over the quality or course of my life? I am the only one who gets to do that. Would I be devastated if I never saw my friends, family, or pets again? Or if I lost the ability to create art, dance, travel, or never eat cocoa curry again? Absolutely. I have more people to live for, things to do, and delicious food to enjoy. Whether this one person is around or not will not make the ride any less awesome. Story 81. Probably got hurt, learned to depend on themselves, enjoy the advantages more than the disadvantages, got used to it, now scared to lose it. Story 82. People expect you to meet their expectations without meeting yours in return. It is easier to not have to answer to anyone or their feelings. Story 83. Only a few people I have met have made me genuinely interested in a relationship, and they did not want to be with me. It is what it is. Call me cynical, but I think a lot of people enter relationships because they do not want to be alone and it is easier financially. Neither applies to me. I am fairly well off and do not mind being alone, so I am very choosy about who I want to be with. Story 84. Solitude is its own form of addiction. You do not have to change yourself. You do not have to push yourself outside of your own comforts when you are single. You like what you like, and no one can tell you otherwise. Your time is always your own, and you never have to accommodate or account for someone else's time or feelings. It is all about your own time and feelings. It is never about another. This is not necessarily about being selfish. It is just about making life easier. Personally, I do not think true growth happens for people who prefer that life, but to each their own. Story 85. Because relationships are hard, considering and sometimes choosing someone else before yourself can be extremely challenging for certain people. Yes, less stress, and that is fitting for some people. Story 86. I can tell you why I did. I have a demanding job. Every day, about 12 hours a day, someone needs something from me. It's exhausting, but it's what I do and I am good at it. At home, my kids are generally pretty calm, and I love spending time with them, but I no longer have a demanding wife or girlfriend. The peace I have found is far more valuable to me than having to be constantly on for someone else. I tried dating for a bit. My instincts are clearly broken because they all turned out to be the type that perform tests and have unspoken expectations that I absolutely must meet. I have to pay for everything and do all the work. When speaking to my male friends, well, let's just say my broken instincts do not have a lot of variety to choose from these days. Sorry, not interested in that mess. If I want sex, I just go out and find a one-night stand or weekend partner. Sure, I miss the connection sometimes, but it is not worth losing my peace. Took me 50 years to get where I am. Story 87. As many have already said, it's hard to trust people, especially after you have been hurt a few times. Not to mention, my dating pool as a straight woman in my late 30s with no children is unhealthy, and the political climate makes dating a man a dangerous prospect. If I choose wrong, I could end up with someone who believes the government has the right to use my body as an incubator and that I have no value as a childless woman with cats. I think a lot has to do with how you have been raised or socialized. My late mother raised me as a single parent and never dated. Her sister had 2 children and never dated as well. I have been single for nearly 2 years and spent the majority of my 20s single. My relationships have come incidentally from friendships or friends of friends. I never had a strong urge to date solely for the purpose of finding a partner. I have noticed that my friends in their late 30s who grew up with divorced parents who dated frequently often follow the same pattern as their parents. They cannot be single for even a moderate period and jump into relationships as soon as they can. I am not saying there is anything wrong with that, but I feel it is important to be self-sufficient and feel whole outside of a relationship. Story 88. Some people prefer it that way. I have some relatives who prefer to be alone. One of them specifically told me that he does not like having long conversations and would only want someone temporarily. I also had an uncle who did not want to settle down or have children. In my case, I want to have a connection with someone, But I also know it is possible that I can stay alone or end up having short-term relationships that do not work out in the long run. Living in a city makes it more complicated because people want different things. I feel like these days it is easy to find someone who does not put in the effort when it comes to relationships. With many options available, that makes everything much harder. Dating apps are terrible. When I was on them not long ago, people seemed interested at first, but as soon as I gave them my number, the conversation would die. I guess the game of conquest was over, and it became lame once they received my number. Another possibility was that they had many numbers and could not keep up with them. So ghosting happened often. There were a few instances where the person was mean to me, and I stopped contacting them because they did not want me to be like their ex-wife or had anger issues. There was a good example I saw not long ago on a video platform that made a lot of sense when it comes to relationships, especially if they are toxic. If the person is a cheater and a lazy person who will not go out of their way for their partner, they would rather choose the cheap fast food meal, which would be their fling because she lives close by, rather than their partner, who would be considered the fancy meal that lives farther away. The cheaper meal wins because it is more about convenience than having a solid connection, if that makes sense. In my situation, that is exactly what I went through. My ex chose the average woman who lived near him rather than me because I live 2 hours away by train. So I am kind of just easygoing now. If something good happens, then I am all for it, but if not, then I am okay with being alone. Story 89. They see the negatives from previous generations but are also wise enough to choose not to have children or have accepted this based on their own beliefs and observations. I believe these types of people would make great parents, but due to their upbringing or personal beliefs, they choose otherwise. Story 90. If you mean people who had been in a relationship and then chose to remain single, common reasons are likely heartbreak, pain, loss, disappointment, and frustration. If you mean people who were never in a relationship, reasons might include being busy with other priorities, never finding anyone they liked, or not being interested. Overall, it could be that people do not choose their preferences consciously, similar to how I did not choose my sexuality but was born with a certain primal drive. The phrase genuinely prefer is interesting. How can you know if you prefer what you are? You are not anything else. You will never know what it is like to not be you. From that perspective, lacking experience of any other possibility, preference loses all meaning. You would have to have been in a relationship to prefer being single. You can always have been single and say you prefer it that way, but there is nothing to compare it to. Story 91. I choose to stay single because I am becoming the partner I want to attract. When I meet someone who adds to my life and is willing to grow with me, I am willing to change my choice. If that does not happen, I will continue enjoying the peace I have created for myself. Story 92. I do not want children, and my religion prevents me from taking any action regarding that. Additionally, I never really developed the skills to pursue a relationship with a woman. Story 93. It depends on the person. Some do it just because they can't find someone they like enough to spend their lives with. For me, I waited to get married until I really felt like I had a handle on my career and core financial foundation at age 34. Hindsight being 2020, I may not have ever gotten married for many reasons. My wife is a lovely person and has never wronged me. We have wonderful children, and that alone is reason enough for me not to have regrets. But in hindsight, I realize now how high my sex drive is compared to hers. It has become more pronounced in recent years for various reasons. The idea of monogamy and a limited sex routine compared to dating, meeting new partners, and trying new things is tough for me. There is also a lot of independence that is lost in marriage. I don't mean that in a bad way, like marrying a controlling person. I mean that inherently, when you start a family, you lose a lot of independence. You need to be emotionally available for others and coordinate things with them. For example, a friend asked if I wanted to fly to Miami for a basketball game on short notice this past year and meet some old friends from undergrad. If I were single, I would have just said, "Great, let's go." You lose that ability once you start a family. I understand the appeal of maintaining complete autonomy and independence. That doesn't mean I'm divorcing my wife or harbor ill will toward her. It just means that, with the benefit of hindsight, I understand better why people might prefer to stay single. Story 94. I do not add any value to it, so why would I pursue a relationship? Who wants to date a loser? It is better for them to try to find somebody worthy of love. Story 95. I was a serial monogamist from 16 to 24. I decided to try being single at 24, and I am loving it, not gonna lie. 2 years in, and I still have no intention of resuming a relationship. So my answer would be past experience. Story 96. Not sure about others, but I just cannot deal with the stress of attempting to date anymore. It was not worth it in retrospect. Also, with the mortgage, I cannot even afford to date anyway. Story 97. I have had partners in my life, but for the last few years, I have focused on creating a good life for myself. I have invested my social energy in maintaining friendships, building community, and getting closer to my family. I went to therapy and worked through difficult issues. A spiritual practice and being of service add meaning and purpose to my life. I live in the mountains and enjoy nature every day. I have plenty of free time to focus on my art and writing. I enjoy my solitude because it is peaceful, not lonely. In short, I am more content than I have ever been in life. I am open to a partnership that can add to my life, but I do not need one out of lack or loneliness. Since I have no motivation to look for that partner because dating is a challenge, I will probably be single for life. Story 98. Because they have not met the right person and are not going to compromise out of fear of being alone. Story 99. Honestly, I'm terrible in romantic relationships. I put the person on a pedestal. I go the extra mile to do whatever for them but keep them at arm's length for them to reciprocate. I also have a terrible temper and have a fear of ever hurting someone. Ultimately, if I like someone enough, why would I subject them to myself? Story 100. Are we all avoidant in here? I am single for peace, simplicity, and because the example my parents set for marriage was one of stress, not love and happiness, so I do not feel at ease in a long-term relationship. I guess I am on the avoidant attachment side of things. So if we are honest, how much of the pursuit of peace and simplicity through being single is a form of avoidant attachment? Of course, I am not judging. I am curious. Story 101. Meeting people nowadays is incredibly difficult. When I try online dating, I either waste a lot of time or get annoyed. There is so much shallowness or people with different objectives on those sites other than dating. Face-to-face interactions are just as bad, since getting a phone number and a date afterwards has become almost impossible. Instead, talking a bit with someone and getting their Instagram has more success. But then you go through the hassle of talking online, and it's like an interview to earn the honor of dating, rather than getting to know each other a little. That has been my experience over the last 3 years. I am curious to hear about others' encounters. Story 102. Everyone should be happy enough being alone with themselves so they do not need a partner to feel fulfilled. Then, and only then, are any of us ready for relationships if we want them. If you have to ask that question, you should probably try being single for a while and learn how to be happy and complete before you burn out a partner looking for that peace. Story 103. True compatibility and chemistry are a matter of chance, and some people are not lucky. After finding that foundation, you also have to be with someone who perceives relationships the same way, as a space to grow and evolve together and work on issues, rather than running away at the first sign of trouble. Then, you hope you both grow in the same direction, which requires a lot of compromise, and not everyone is willing to do that work. Story 104. Some people want to live life under their own rules, where to live, how to decorate, and so on, without needing to deal with another person's preferences, their mess, or anything else. Story 105. People lose trust after being wronged. Once that precedent is set, it is tough to recover from it. Story 106. I was in a long-term relationship for 8 years, and in hindsight, it was not healthy for me. It resulted in many self-esteem issues that I have been working to address. I was lucky it ended. I would not say I will stay single for life, but I am a lot happier now, even while still working through my problems. I have a great group of friends, so I am rarely lonely. I do not have any desire for a relationship beyond that, and as I am getting older, I am becoming comfortable and perhaps even happy, accepting that it might always be like this. Story 107. I don't plan on having a long-term relationship because there is no need. Having a child sounds nice, but I feel fulfilled without one. Seeing both my parents die relatively young, I would not want to put someone through that risk. I like being by myself. I have friends to talk to or see when needed, and strangers often talk to me wherever I go. Sometimes it is a little annoying, but the kindness of their gestures often outweighs that. Story 108. I have no particular interest in dating, and when I did, any fulfillment I got from the relationship was outweighed by the amount of work maintaining a relationship requires. It isn't worth the effort to me when I am perfectly content in my own solitude and familial and friend relationships. I like the idea of romance, but that idea is romanticized, and it is exhausting being in a relationship. I have my own space where I do not have to negotiate with anyone else how to decorate, where things belong, how I choose to spend my spare time, where to go for vacation, whose family to visit for any given holiday, or deal with the politics of being an outsider to my partner's family. I only have to clean up after myself. I am not uncomfortable while sharing a bed. And honestly, I do not have any particular need for sex. Sure, it can be fun, but I can take it or leave it. Also, dating when you are gay is like finding a needle in the hookup haystack. Story 109. I mean, for me, it's not a choice. I usually don't get any chance or intimacy, so I just have to be single regardless. Story 110. Some people stay single because they cannot handle emotional closeness. They want connection, but when it happens, it is not a good feeling for them. It feels more like terror, even when the other person does everything the right way. Some wounds are too deep to heal. Story 111. I have met a few people who seem to be headed in that direction. The common denominator appears to be not having healthy role models for what a long-term relationship looks like. Relationships are challenging and require real sacrifice. That can feel wrong or like a foreign concept if you have never seen it done successfully before. That being said, there is nothing wrong with being mostly single throughout your life. That is just what works for some people. Story 112. After my last relationship, I can understand it. I have my own errands to run, and she has hers. I work from 7 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. She works from 9:30 to 6 o'clock. She thought that when I got home at 4 o'clock, I was going to the grocery store for things she wanted or doing her errands. That got tiring quickly. I like being myself, and that's it. Story 113. I am coming up on 9 years of being single. I have dated during that time, but most of the men I met ended up disturbing the peace in my life. I also have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and stress is a major trigger for me. When my stress levels get too high, it leads to insomnia and negatively affects my health. I am not choosing to stay single for life. I would like to have a partner, but over time I have come to deeply value my peace, stability, and mental well-being. If staying single is what it takes to protect those things, I am at peace with that. I believe many people stay single for similar reasons. Some want to avoid emotional instability, some are working through trust issues, and others genuinely enjoy their independence and freedom. After going through difficult experiences, your standards naturally become higher, and you come to understand that it is better to be alone than to settle for an unhealthy relationship. Just to be clear, I know that women can also bring stress into relationships. I am simply speaking from my personal experience as a heterosexual woman. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.